So James Alexander is 21 years old, freshly graduated, the son of Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, and he just showed up at Easter Sunday service at St. George's Chapel looking like he's been quietly attending these events his whole life, which, to be fair, he has. But this time felt different. There's a photograph that's been circulating in royal circles, and once you see it, you genuinely cannot unsee it. Prince William, standing tall at a public engagement, composed and purposeful as ever, and beside him, not his brother, not a senior aide, but James Alexander, quietly repositioned, slowly elevated, and the question hanging in the air right now, the one royal insiders are beginning to ask out loud, is this: has the palace already made its decision about who stands next to the future King of England? Because here's what nobody in the mainstream media wants to say plainly. Harry is gone, not just geographically, he's gone from the working monarchy in every practical, visible, institutional sense, and nature, as it always does, has found a way to fill that gap. The question was never if someone would step into the space Harry left behind. The question was always who. And the answer increasingly appears to be James Alexander. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this breakdown, hit subscribe and join us here at Crown Watch. We track these shifts before they make headlines, and you're going to want to be here for what comes next. All right, back to it. Now, when you think about the British royal family right now, where does your mind go first? Do you think about continuity, about the next generation preparing for power? Or do you think about chaos, drama, and the Sussex saga that never seems to end? Because those two stories, the one happening quietly around William and the one happening loudly in Montecito, are now operating in direct contrast to each other. And the contrast is becoming impossible to ignore. Let's start at the very beginning of this, because context matters enormously here. The space Harry left behind when Prince Harry stepped back from royal duties in January 2020, the palace issued a carefully worded statement. The language was diplomatic. The subtext was devastating. In one announcement, the working monarchy lost one of its two frontline princes, the men who were supposed to share the weight of public life with William for decades to come. And in the years since that announcement, something remarkable has happened. Not immediately, not with fanfare, not with a press release, but quietly, methodically, in the way the British establishment has always moved when it needs to repair something without admitting it was broken. A structural shift has taken place. Harry was supposed to be the buffer, the spare, the one who took the less prestigious engagements, who flew the flag in smaller Commonwealth nations, who represented the crown at events William couldn't attend. He was also supposed to be the emotional ballast, the lighter presence to William's more serious disposition, the one who could work a crowd with charm and self-deprecating humor while his brother carried the gravitas of the air. When that disappeared, the gap was real, not just symbolic, operationally, practically, visibly real. King Charles has had his own health battles to navigate. The Wales household has had to be strategic about public appearances, given everything the family has been through. And William himself, now positioned firmly as the next king, has had to make choices about who he keeps close, who he trusts, and who he allows into the inner circle of his future reign. Entered James Alexander. Now, here is where things get genuinely interesting, and this is the part the Sussex camp, busy with Netflix projects and jam launches in California, appears to have completely missed while it was happening. James Alexander is not a random figure. He did not stumble into proximity with a future King of England by accident. His background, his temperament, and his positioning have all been shaped with a deliberateness that speaks to something deeper than coincidence. He's the son of Prince Edward, the youngest brother of King Charles, and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, two people who have spent decades building a reputation for quiet, scandal-free service. That's the household James Alexander grew up in. Not drama, not headlines, not tell-all interviews, discretion. He comes from a family with deep military connections, a world William knows well and respects deeply. He carries himself with a reserve that the modern royal family values above almost everything else. You simply cannot buy discretion in the age of social media, and the Wales household has been burned badly enough times to know exactly how rare it is. And crucially, James Alexander has been quietly present at engagements, at private events, at moments of institutional significance, in a way that builds familiarity without demanding attention. This is the old model of royal proximity, not the Meghan model, the one that arrived with a publicist and a brand strategy and a team of American PR operatives. The James Alexander model looks much more like the way courtiers and trusted companions have always risen in the British system, slowly, silently, by proving themselves in private before ever appearing in public. And now he is appearing in public. The question you should be asking yourself right now is this: why now? Why is this happening at this particular moment in this particular way? The timing is not accidental. Nothing in the royal calendar ever is. To understand why James Alexander matters, you first have to understand the position William is in. And it's a position of extraordinary complexity. He's preparing for kingship in real time. Charles, for all his resilience, is not a young man, and his health challenges over the past year have accelerated William's own psychological and institutional preparation for what comes next. He's also a father of 3 children who will one day carry the weight of this institution themselves. He's a husband to a woman who has had her own serious health battles and who has emerged from them with a clarity of purpose that has visibly reshaped the Wales household's priorities. And he is doing all of this without his brother. Now, I want to be precise about something here because there's a tendency in this space to dramatize the Harry situation in ways that aren't always useful. The relationship between William and Harry did not simply collapse because of Meghan Markle. It collapsed because of choices made on both sides, choices that accumulated over years, choices that became public in ways that made private reconciliation almost impossibly complicated. But here's what matters institutionally. Whatever the cause, the effect is that William is navigating the most demanding period of his preparation for kingship without the person who was supposed to share it with him. That is a real gap, and real gaps require real solutions. James Alexander represents one of those solutions. Not a replacement for Harry in any emotional or familial sense, let's be clear about that, but a replacement in the working, operational, public-facing sense that the monarchy needs in order to function. Does that distinction matter to you? It should, because confusing the personal and the institutional is exactly the mistake that has made the Sussex situation so endlessly confusing to watch. Harry did not just leave a family. He left a job, and the job, unlike the family, can be filled, while James Alexander has been quietly, incrementally moving into William's orbit. Something else has been happening on the other side of the Atlantic that throws this story into even sharper relief. You may have seen the clip. You probably did. Saturday Night Live, May 2nd, 2026. Colin Jost at the Weekend Update desk, and a joke that landed like a grenade. The joke described Meghan Markle as a hostage situation. The studio didn't groan. They didn't shift in their seats. They howled. Now, I'm not going to spend time on the SNL jokes themselves. There have been enough of them at this point, and frankly, the comedic record speaks for itself. What matters here is not the punchline. What matters is what that reaction tells us about where the Sussex brand stands in the American cultural imagination right now. Because here's the thing that should genuinely concern anyone watching the Sussex story with clear eyes. SNL is not a fringe operation. It's not a tabloid. It's not a royal commentary channel on YouTube. It is the most watched late-night comedy institution in America, with a writing room full of some of the most culturally attuned people in entertainment, vetted by lawyers, approved by NBC executives, and broadcast in prime time on national television. And they have been tracking the Sussex brand collapse in punchline form since 2018. Joke by joke, year by year, audience reaction by audience reaction. The 2018 joke called Harry an unemployed dude living with his grandma on the literal night of his wedding. The 2023 faux rap sketch dropped the line, "Queen said not today, Satan," and it entered the Royal Watcher lexicon overnight. The 2025 trade deal joke suggested Britain was using American tariffs as cover to refuse to take the Sussexes back. And now, 2026, the hostage punchline. Same desk, same writer room, bigger reaction. What does this have to do with James Alexander? Everything. Because while Meghan and Harry have been managing their Montecito brand, while they have been navigating Netflix projects and podcast pivots and jam launches and polo fundraisers, the institutional vacuum they left behind has been quietly, efficiently, and almost invisibly filled. Not with drama, not with press releases, not with a documentary series, with a young man who knows how to stand in the right place at the right time and not make it about himself. Now, here's something most people who follow the royal family casually do not fully appreciate. Proximity to a future monarch is not just a social distinction. It's an institutional function. The people who stand close to kings, who travel with them, who advise them, who are trusted enough to be present in both formal and informal settings, these people shape history in ways that rarely make the history books. They're the ones who say, in a quiet moment before a major speech, "I think this line lands wrong." They're the ones who manage the human logistics of an institution that cannot afford human error. They're the ones who carry the emotional temperature of a royal household through periods of pressure and transition. Harry was supposed to be one of those people for William, not because they were brothers. The monarchy is full of brothers who have hated each other, but because Harry had been trained for the role and had demonstrated in his military service and in his early royal engagements that he had the temperament and the capability, and then he walked away. James Alexander's elevation, if that's what we're witnessing, is not the palace playing favorites. It's the palace doing what it has always done, finding the right person for the right role and moving them quietly into position. There's no announcement because there doesn't need to be. The announcement, when it comes, will be the images themselves, the placement at engagements, the body language captured by press photographers, the gradual, visible normalization of a new configuration around the future king, and it's already happening. Let's talk about what we actually know about how William and James Alexander operate together, because this is the part that deserves the most careful attention. William, by temperament and by training, does not do warmth easily in public. He's dutiful, he's prepared, he's deeply committed to the institutional role he's been prepared for his entire life. But the easy, loose, crowd-working charm that Harry used to bring to joint engagements is simply not William's natural register. He knows this about himself. His team knows it. And for years, Harry's presence in joint appearances served as a kind of tonal balance, a social pressure valve. Without Harry, William has had to lean more heavily on the structures around him. He's had to be more deliberate about the human energy he surrounds himself with in public settings. And in James Alexander, observers who have watched the body language of recent appearances are noticing something specific, a relaxation in William's public demeanor that hasn't been consistently present for several years. That's not a small thing. In a constitutional monarchy where so much of the institution's legitimacy rests on public perception and emotional connection, a future king who appears at ease in his closest relationships is a future king who projects stability. And stability right now is exactly what the British monarchy needs to project. But ask yourself this question, because it's one royal watchers are genuinely grappling with. Is James Alexander being positioned consciously, with palace involvement, or is this simply an organic friendship being read through the lens of institutional significance? And does it matter? Because here's the uncomfortable truth about how royal proximity works. By the time the palace acknowledges it publicly, it has already been happening privately for years. The relationship is real before the institution recognizes it. The function precedes the title. The trust is established before it's ever tested in public, which means if you're waiting for an official announcement, a title, a role, a formal recognition of James Alexander's position in William's life and working structure, you're waiting for the last act of a play that's already in progress. This is perhaps the most significant part of this entire story, and it's the part I think history will be particularly unforgiving about. When Harry and Meghan left in 2020, there was a calculation embedded in their departure. The calculation, whether explicitly articulated or not, was that their absence would create enough institutional pain, enough public sympathy for Harry, enough pressure on a family that had been portrayed as cold and exclusionary, that the terms of their departure would eventually be renegotiated on more favorable terms. That calculation has not worked out, not because the royal family called their bluff, not because the British media turned against them, though it did, not even because the American media, including Saturday Night Live, began tracking the brand collapse in real time, though that's significant. It has not worked out because the monarchy, like all mature institutions, does not depend on any individual more than it depends on its own continuity. The gap Harry left was real, but the institution did not grieve it. The institution adapted, it found people, it reorganized, it moved on. And the man who was supposed to be the emotional and operational co-anchor of the next reign is now watching from Montecito as someone he has never met begins to quietly occupy the functional role Harry vacated. Do you think Harry has thought about that? Do you think in the moments between Netflix engagements and polo matches and whatever the next project is, he has sat with the reality that the space he left has been filled? Not with drama, not with crisis, not with the institutional panic he may have anticipated, but calmly, efficiently, and with the kind of low-key competence the British establishment has always found wherever it needed to. Because that's the story nobody is putting on the front page. The Sussex departure did not destabilize the monarchy. It made the monarchy more efficient. It removed a variable that had become, however inadvertently, a source of institutional friction, and in its place a cleaner, calmer, more controlled version of royal proximity has emerged. James Alexander is not a story about filling a hole. He's a story about what the institution chose when it had a choice. There's one more dimension to this story I want to address directly, because it matters enormously for how we understand what's happening right now. The timing of James Alexander's emergence in William's visible world is not random. It coincides with several things happening simultaneously: King Charles's state visit to America, Harry's ongoing legal battles, and his public appeals for reconciliation with his family, appeals that notably have been received with institutional silence rather than institutional engagement. Meghan's latest Netflix project, launching into a media environment where SNL is running hostage jokes about her on primetime television, and the broader reconfiguration of the senior working royals, with Princess Anne continuing her relentless public schedule, with the Wales household projecting domesticity and stability, and with the palace very deliberately shaping the narrative of continuity around William's future reign. In that context, the emergence of James Alexander is not simply a personal story, it's a piece of institutional communication. The monarchy is saying something without saying it in words. It's saying, we are prepared, we are stable, we have built the structures the next reign will require, and the people who stand beside the future King of England have been chosen, tested, and are in place. That message is directed inward at the institution itself, at the people who work within it, at the politicians and officials in foreign governments who need to know the transition will be smooth. But it's also necessarily directed outward at the public, at the media, and whether this was the intention or not, at the man living in Montecito who walked away from this role and left this space open. Now, I want to spend a moment on something that comes up constantly in this conversation because it's relevant and it deserves a direct answer. Is there any scenario in which Harry returns to a formal royal role, to a regular working relationship with William, to anything resembling the position he vacated? The honest answer, based on everything we can observe from the outside, is that it's becoming structurally more difficult with each passing month. Not because the emotional wounds can't be addressed, not even because the institutional damage can't be repaired, but because the institution has moved on in a very specific direction. And the direction it has moved makes a formal return significantly more complicated. When there was a gap, a return was possible in a practical sense. There was a role, a function, a structural need Harry could conceivably have met. With James Alexander now occupying that functional space, even a hypothetical return would require navigating a new configuration that didn't exist 2 years ago. The institution does not hold positions open indefinitely. It fills them. It has filled this one. And that, more than any legal dispute, more than any interview, more than any documentary or memoir or podcast, is the development that truly changes the geometry of Harry's situation. The door is not necessarily closed, but the room behind it is no longer empty. And this is the part I don't think has been examined with enough honesty anywhere in this conversation. What Harry and Meghan walked away from was not simply a collection of titles and ceremonial duties. It was proximity, it was influence, it was the particular and irreplaceable kind of access that only comes from being inside the institution rather than commenting on it from the outside. That distinction matters enormously because there's a version of royal relevance that operates from within, quiet, structural, generationally durable. And there's a version that operates from without, loud, commercially dependent, subject to the unpredictable appetites of media cycles and public attention. Harry chose the second version. And for a window, a genuinely significant window, maybe 2020 through 23, it worked. The Oprah interview commanded a global audience. The memoir sold millions. The Netflix documentary drew viewership numbers studios spent decades trying to manufacture. But here's what that window concealed. Commercial relevance built on institutional proximity has a shelf life. Once the proximity is gone, once the titles are no longer fresh, once the palace chapters have all been written and the family grievances have all been aired, what remains? What is the product stripped of the royal dimension that made it extraordinary in the first place? That's the question Montecito is living with. And there's no clean answer. The Sussex brand staked everything on the idea that Harry and Meghan, as a proposition, were bigger than the institution they left. That their story, their values, their public presence could sustain itself independently of the royal connection that generated it. What we're watching in real time across the brand collapses and the SNL jokes and the dwindling commercial returns is the market delivering its verdict on that proposition. And simultaneously, not coincidentally, but simultaneously, we're watching a young man in Windsor quietly, patiently, without a single press release or a single Netflix pitch, do the thing Harry once did simply by virtue of showing up. Stand beside the future King of England and make it look effortless. That contrast is not commentary, it's not editorializing, it's just what's happening. And the longer it continues, the more clearly it illuminates the full cost of the calculation made in 2020. You can leave the institution, you cannot take the institution with you. So where does this leave us? What's the actual significance of the James Alexander story, stripped of the emotion and the Sussex drama and the SNL jokes and all the noise? It means the British monarchy is doing what the British monarchy has always done in moments of transition and difficulty. It's adapting. It's finding the right people for the right roles. It's moving those people quietly into position without announcing itself, without asking for approval, without waiting for the external narrative to catch up. And it's building around the future King William a supporting structure that reflects his temperament, his values, his institutional priorities, and his vision for what the monarchy should look like in the decades ahead. James Alexander is part of that structure. How large a part, how formal, how permanent, how publicly acknowledged that role will eventually become, we don't yet know. The palace will tell us when it's ready to tell us, which is to say when it's no longer relevant to ask. What we know right now is that the photographs exist. The appearances are happening. The body language tells a story. And the space Harry left behind, the space that was supposed to be his for a lifetime, has been filled by someone who arrived without drama, without a Netflix deal, and without a publicist. Just a young man standing in the right place at the right time, beside the future King of England, while the jokes play on Saturday night, while the cameras roll in Montecito, while the institution moves forward as it always has, in silence.